In this presentation, I'm going to show you how to create a histogram in Excel around the idea of a bin, which essentially is just an interval that represents represents our data. So it's just sort of the way we want to interval the data up so that we can actually see what's going on. And basically what we need to remember is that a histogram shows us the number of samples that fall into each bin. So therefore, we have on one axis of our histogram the number of samples, and on the other axis we essentially have the size of our bins, or what we would label that interval to specifically be. So here you can see that we have data, and this data represents the price of textbooks, which, as you can see, can range from fairly inexpensive to extremely expensive really quickly. And so in order to create our histogram, the first thing we need to do is we need to choose the limits for our bins. And again, our bins represent just different intervals that we want to use to represent this data. So our lower limit is essentially going to be a value that is close to or right below the smallest value that we have here. So our small value here is 121. So in our case, we're actually going to choose our first bin to be 125 because it's close to, and or in our case it's not below, but it's close to our smallest value. And then we're going to choose an upper limit, and our upper limit, again, similar to our lower limit, it's close to or just above our largest value, and in our case we're going to choose an upper limit of 250. And this upper limit, again, we do have one value, let's see if we can find it, right here that is actually above that, but again it's a close sort of limit. And then what we want to do is we want to divide these, come up with some number that we want to represent our bins in. So we have a maximum or a minimum and a maximum. In my case, I'm just going to have intervals of 25. So, 175, 200, 25, and then so then what we need to do is we essentially need to count the number of textbooks that fall into each of these bin limit ranges. In order to now actually do our individual counts for our different intervals, what we need to do is we need to use the frequency function. But first what we need to do is we need to actually select one additional cell here in this, and then use the frequency function. In this case we have two inputs, the data array here, and then the bins array, which is our limits for our intervals or our bins. We press enter, and then what we need to do, because we want it to be an array, meaning that we want it to display data all the way down, is we have to hit Control Shift Enter. Now if we have a Mac, you actually use the command return button. On our PC you use the Control Shift Enter. Again, this is because it's an array. So you can see we have counts for the different pieces. And so what this tells us essentially is the number of textbooks that fit within these different intervals. So now what we need to do is we actually need to label this, and so our first label is going to be anything that's less than or equal to 125. This interval is from 126 to 150, 151 through 175, 176 through 200, and then 220, 201 through 225. In this case, it's anything greater than 251. actually, I realized I missed an interval, so 226 through 250, and then in this last one, anything greater than 251. And then now using this data, we actually can go in and create our histogram. So you just select these two data points, go to Insert, in our case a column, and you can see here that we, on the bottom, have our intervals, so the different bins, and in this axis it's the number of counts that fit within each of these bins. So I hope you have a better understanding now of how to plot a histogram in Excel. Thanks.